Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio. And now, here's our host, Dr. Vanessa Anceloni.
Welcome, dear listener, to Kardec Radio. Today we are here live at Chantilly, Virginia, the studios of Kardec Radio, talking about the power of affirmative prayer. And there is no better person than our good friend, Reverend Ellis Reed, who is here with us to talk about this very empowering mechanism of communicating with God and making our lives all the better. Ellis Reed is the Reverend and the head of the Center for Spiritual Living, Central Maryland. She has a beautiful attitude in life. She has been helping many, many people. Professionally speaking, she's also an accountant, and she has a beautiful, beautiful business, I would say. It's compassionate business because it helps people with their finances, but with compassion. Certainly, the way we lead our lives can change the way we think about, we relate to other people, etc. We got to know of Ellis Reed a while ago when we were still in Baltimore, Maryland, and it was also through Reverend Jeffrey Proctor. You know, we love Jeffrey Proctor. We know here he's full-time in the spiritual realm now. But he was awarded by Divaldo Franco the Peace in You Award in 2008. And soon after, he discarnated. He was freed from the physical body, but certainly living in this beautiful universe of God. And he was the first person to talk to us in the Spirited side of Baltimore about affirmative prayer. And it's very much hand in hand with the teachings of Spiritism. If you go to the chapter, the very chapter 27 of the Gospel according to Spiritism, it talks about ask and you shall receive. And quoting Mark 11 and verse 24, Allan Kardec tells us quite clearly, whatever you may ask for in a prayer, believe you will receive it, and it will be granted to you. And Kardec explains, there are people who contest the effectiveness of prayer, and they base their argument on the principle that if God knows our needs, it's superfluous to state them. They add further that since everything in the universe is linked together by eternal laws, our desires cannot change God's decrees. Without any doubt, there are natural and immutable laws from which God cannot derogate according to one's caprice. There is a great distance, however, from believing this and believing that all life's circumstances are subject to fatalism. If such were the case, humans would be only a passive instrument with no free will or initiative. Under such a hypothesis, there would be no other recourse than to bend one's head under the blow of every event, without seeking to avoid the circumstances. And he goes on and on to tell us that it would be illogical to conclude from this maxim, whatever you may ask for in a prayer will be granted to you, that it is enough simply to ask in order to receive. And it would be unjust to accuse Providence if it does not grant every request made, because it knows better than we do what is best for us. The same applies to a wise father who refuses his son things that are not in his best interest. Generally, humans see only the present. However, if suffering is useful for their future happiness, God will allow them to suffer, just as a surgeon allows the sick person to suffer an operation that should bring healing. What God will grant them if asked with trust is courage, patience, and resignation. Dear listener, in this very chapter, there's much, much more about this, and it goes hand in hand with the teachings that were brought in by the amazing mind of Ernest Holmes, the author of The Science of the Mind, the one that really is the cornerstone of the religious science church, a church like the one that is led by Reverend Alice Reed. And we are going to be opening the line very soon for her. She's talking to us directly from Maryland, and she's going to explain to us about this and much more. And you can, at any point, ask your questions by email or by calling us. You can call us here live at the studios of Kardec Radio at 858-769-4705, or go to our Blog Talk Radio chat room and ask or make a comment live. You can also go to KardecRadio.com. There's a contact form that goes directly to our email, and we'll be happy to assist you in your questions. Well, for right now, we would like to play a very message that will be setting the tone for our program today. It's called Only Today. It came through the mediumistic abilities of the renowned Brazilian medium, Chico Xavier, and this is already in CD and in book format at the bookstore of the Spiritist Society of Baltimore, www.ssbaltimore.org. Listen to this beautiful message after the break. Reverend Alice Reed is going to be here with us, telling us about the power of affirmative prayer.
Only today. Throughout your whole life, you will never have another day like today. Remember this, and attend to all good that you can do. Be useful by helping someone. Pay heed to your duties. Happiness and peace, hope and care are what you wish to sow in your path. Joy and favor are gifts that you wish to offer. Relationships that you need to mend, courtesy at home, the most simple and the most demanding work. Review, readjustment, corrections, forgiveness, signs of care and esteem, spiritual support during the work that you embrace and bless. Not one of these things should you delay or leave for later, because time will not return. In a day like today, you only have once.
We will return to our program after these messages.
New release, Liberation. In this compelling narrative, Andre Louise emphasizes the work of high-order spirits in the effort to convert the spirit Gregorio to the good, an effort that culminates with the unforgettable re-encounter with his mother, herself a highly evolved spirit, wherein he surrenders to the irresistible call of love. The book also contains information on how unhappy spirits act as they try to involve incarnates in their wiles. The spirit author tells of the intercession of high-order spirits on behalf of human beings, demonstrating the divine compassion that grants to all the blessed opportunity to free themselves by means of study, labor, and persevering service in the practice of the good. Buy your copy today at www.ediceiofamerica.com.
Spread the word. Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
Want spirituous books for your children? At Edicei of America, you will find a collection of them. From the best-selling book, Our Father, in which the Spirit May through Chico Xavier brought countless poems, stories and folk tales based on the Lord's Prayer, to the beautiful and educational collection by the author Adelison Sales on Back to School and many others. Buy your copy today at www.eddiesaveamerica.com.
Nourish Your Soul with Kardec Radio.
If you missed out on previous shows, no worries. We have an on-demand sections of all previous shows and interviews. Go to our website, www.kardecradio.com.
Nourish Your Soul with Kardec Radio.
Spiritism for Everyone, the online study of Spiritism. This year with the in-depth study of the book Genesis by Allan Kardec. Join us every Wednesday evening through the web from any computer or mobile device, no matter where you are in the U.S. or the world. Spiritism for Everyone is free, open to all, and requires no registration. For more information, go to www.spiritus.us. Spiritism for Everyone is a program of the United States Spiritist Council.
And now we return to our program.
Dear listener, we are here live talking about affirmative prayer. You may be asking, what is it? Is it any different from a regular prayer? Well, stay here and you get to know. I tell you one thing, it can be very transformative. It can really change lives. And it goes hand in hand with the teachings of Spiritism. And you see how you can easily bridge them up. It's about the universality of the teachings, of the Spiritist teachings. They're all over the place. No matter the names we give, they're there. And to tell us more about this, we brought an expert, Reverend Alice Reed. She is, besides many other things, she's the head of the Center for Spiritual Living Central Maryland, and she is a good collaborator of the Spiritist side of Baltimore, and she has already given a talk at an event at the Spirit side of Baltimore, and she was good friends with Dr. and Reverend Jeffrey Proctor, who was awarded the PCU Award by Divaldo Franco in 2008 at the first PCU Peace and You movement in the United States, which was held in Baltimore, Maryland. Right here with us and now is Reverend Alice Reed with us. Thank you so much, Alice, for being with us today.
Good morning.
Thank you. Now, Alice, we're curious. We know you are also an accountant. So how did you go from being an accountant and still working as an accountant to getting to be reverend at a religious science church?
Oh, well, that's a great question. I think most people look at a profession like I'm not only an accountant, but I actually specialize in taxation. So that's a very obtuse place for Americans, at least. When we think about our taxes, it's a place where people really get tight and concerned and afraid. I personally have been on a spiritual path for many, many years, and my spiritual path and I would say, is my avocation and my vocation of being an accountant kind of were on parallel paths, but not really intersecting for a long time. When I found the Science of Mind teaching, I actually found a way to really integrate my what I do with who I am. And when I started to take classes and learn about the philosophy of religious science, I found that it was really easy to find, if you would, the holy in what many people consider the unholy.
Exactly.
Yes. So
and isn't that funny, Alice? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you brought in such an important comment. People usually think that there is life in the church or at a temple and life elsewhere, as if God is not everywhere, permeating and blessing everything we do.
It is interesting to me, and I even find myself, if I'm not being conscious, to believe the mass media and the race consciousness that we have, that God is somewhere else. It's in the church. It's away from us, as opposed to living and residing within us, which is a great appeal that I had for when I started learning the Science of Mind principles.
So then you walked step by step from being like a participant. How did you get to decide to be a reverend?
I want to say it kind of picked me more than I picked it. So my teacher, Jeffrey Proctor, who you talked about, saw something in me that I don't know that I really saw in myself. What I have found is that there's this beautiful surrender that happens when we really step on and embrace the spiritual path. And the more I surrender, the more I become available to my own authenticity. And so as I studied with Dr. Proctor, Jeffrey as we referred to him always, as I studied with him, I just became more and more in tune with what I'm here to do, and what I'm really here to do is to be that safe space for people to realize a greater wholeness within themselves and a greater relationship with a spirit or a God that lives within them.
So let us talk a little bit about Jeffrey Proctor, because he was good friends of ours. He was a good collaborator at the Spiritist Society of Baltimore. He came there once to give a talk about affirmative prayer, and we were so impressed with his friendliness and mostly his intelligence, because he was able to bridge up the teachings of Allan Kardec and the religious science teachings so well. We're quite impressed. And then later, through his works and how they really impacted the community around, Divaldo Franco decided to award him the PCNU Award, and we'll never forget his talk, which is actually on a DVD if people want to acquire, and actually in a book, because he released the copyright of the whole talk to become a book that is the rights are for the foundation that helps more than 3,500 children on a daily basis in Brazil. So that's all. Jeffrey Proctor, can you tell us more about Jeffrey?
Certainly. I first came across Jeffrey. My mother was going to his services when he was the pastor of the Center for Spiritual Living, Baltimore and Towson, and when I first met him, I knew that there was something about him that was very different. And what I came to find out was that he really had a huge heart and a kindness and a gentleness about him. But it was coupled with this beautiful intellect. And the two of them came together to just really embrace you. He was an amazing teacher. And one of the things that I really embraced about Jeffrey, or that Jeffrey really embraced about me, was that we could, he always gave us the ability to find that within ourselves, as opposed to trying to insist that we do things his way. He would see the beauty in you and bring it out. And I think that really is the hallmark of an amazing teacher.
Certainly. And we'll never forget the much he has taught many people. We were at the service when they were paying tribute to his memory, and I'll never forget, I was quite impressed how many people came even from other countries to pay tribute to his memories, because he's really he's made a difference in our community, not only the local community but the larger community in the very sense of the word. Now, everything in the Church of Religious Science is based on Ernest Holmes' teachings. Probably there are some people listening to us who haven't heard, or have heard but I don't know quite well. Would you please kindly, Alice, tell us more about Ernest Holmes, who he was, and the book he wrote, and really created a new pathway of teachings for people around the world?
Absolutely. Ernest Holmes was a fellow who was born in New England to a large family and was the youngest of 9 brothers, and was always inquisitive. As a matter of fact, his family always called him the question mark, because he would ask so many questions. And he was an avid reader and an avid student of life and literature. And it is said that he came across a book by Ralph Waldo Emerson, and it was Emerson's essays that really opened him up to this higher idea of these truth principles that we teach in the Science of Mind. He was an amazing speaker, and when he moved to California, he would hold symposiums where he would share the things that he had learned through the writings of Ralph Waldo Emerson. He also studied many other New Thought intellectuals like Emma Curtis Hopkins and Judge Thomas Troward, and it was through these writings that and he also studied other truth principles. And what we know about Ernest is that it wasn't that he brought forward anything new, but that he was able to really synthesize a lot of these ancient wisdom truth principles and bring them together in a book that's called The Science of Mind. That book was originally published in the early 1920s, and it was from a bunch of his lectures that were actually transcribed, and it was in the late 1930s that they actually reworked the book so that it became the textbook, which is one of the basic texts that we study from. But it is not the only text we study from. But it does give folks a real platform or a foundation when they're beginning to study truth principles through our philosophy.
So Ernest Holmes really brought a new perspective. How did, from his book, we got to the movement of religious science?
Can I ask you to repeat that question? I didn't.
Yeah. How from his book, the movement of religious science in general and the churches came along? People just started coming and listening to him and resonating with what he had written, and by the 50s, we became a spiritual movement or a movement of churches, and so we incorporated it as a religion in the 50s. The movement is we're relatively new when it comes to religions, so we've really only been around since the early 50s, and as a formal movement, and in the last 10 years, we've really begun to synthesize and look at the teaching in a way that can be shared with more people. We've changed our name, actually, to Centers for Spiritual Living. So when you see Centers for Spiritual Living, you'll know that is a community that is connected with the Ernest Holmes teaching and the Science of Mind philosophy. And it's very open to all philosophies. Am I right?
Oh, absolutely. The truth is truth. As I was listening to the recordings and the readings that you were doing, I was listening and hearing, of course, many things that are very similar to what we teach in Science of Mind, in that there's just this ancient wisdom that has been around forever, and it's come through the course of history, and different religions have put their mark on it. But I can be talking to a Catholic or a Buddhist or somebody who's Jewish or Muslim, and I can find a resonance there with exactly what we teach in Science of Mind. It isn't about trying to find the differences, but about our oneness.
So it's all embracing. It's so important nowadays.
Absolutely.
Right? It's
Absolutely.
so important.
We're very inclusive, and on any Sunday, you'll find me talking about Buddhist principles, or Christian principles, or Muslim principles, or just ancient Vedic principles, because there is that deep resonance. in truth that wants to be known.
Okay, Alice, we're going to give a short break, but when we come back, we want to know more about affirmative prayer and the steps that encompass affirmative prayer and how people can really change their lives with it, okay?
That'll be great. Thanks.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Getting to the Light. Spiritist Therapy for Discarnate Spirits is a small book that offers guidance to Spiritist practitioners and Spiritist counselors. Purchase your copy at www.ssbaltimore.org. Nourish Your Soul with Kardec Radio.
If you missed out on a previous shows, no worries. We have an on-demand section of all previous shows and interviews. Go to our website at www.kardecradio.com.
Spread the word. Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
Help prevent suicide by reading and sharing these books with others. 2 great books are available to help in this Kardec Radio campaign to prevent suicide. Suicide, All You Need to Know, by the international Spiritist speaker Richard Simonetti. You can buy your copy at www.roundtablepublishing-uk.com. Also, Memoirs of a Suicide by the medium Yvonne Pereda. Buy your copy today at www.ediceiofamerica.com.
Kardec Radio, live every Saturday at 11 a.m.
Kardec Radio now offers more programs during the week and weekends. Every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you can follow the beautiful program God at Home with Francisca Kranz and the British Spiritist community. They will brighten your days by doing a God at Home meeting wherever you are in the world, while teaching you how to do the same in your own home with your family and friends. Every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you will hear incredibly inspirational Spiritist talks directly broadcasted by Spiritist Network. They will be true educational moments to carry out to immortality. Every Saturday, live interviews, Bridging Health and Spiritism with the host Dr. Vanessa Anceloni. You may ask questions to the interviewed guests by calling 858-769-4705. And every Sunday, tune in to Spiritist Awareness at Kardec Radio. You will hear a series of segments on a diversity of Spiritist topics. Kardec will broadcast the Spiritist Moment with Kirsten DeMello, the reading of the Spiritist book by John DeRosa and Steve Shepard, Spiritism in Your Life with Drs. Marco and Joyce Magalhães, Spiritism and the Gospel with Luis Sergio Marotta, Spiritist Education for Youth and Children with Bernadette Leal, Spiritist Music with James Marotta, Neuroscience and Spiritism with Dr. Vanessa Anceloni, and many more segments coming soon. Enjoy it all and nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
And now we return to our program.
We are here, listener, talking about the power of affirmative prayer. And to discuss this and teach us more about it, we have an expert in the field, Reverend Alice Reed, who is the head of the Center for Spiritual Living, Central Maryland. She is here with us telling us much and much more about this. But before we go there, we'd like to thank Lisa Cheek for sending Kardec Radio a message saying thank you for the heads up. Prayer is the most important action we can do daily if it is an arrow prayer. This will be good as usual. Thank you. May God bless all of you who make Kardec Radio possible for people to learn the way. Thank you so much, Lisa, for your kindness and your loving words. We also like to thank all the listeners who have been sending us messages, suggestions, who are also offering their services, because of course Kardec Radio is 100% volunteer-based. None of us get anything to do this work. We do it out of the heart because this is the way to go. And by the way, there are listeners in more than 61 countries around the world, and all you can do is share the news. Kardec Radio is here to stay with you, to nourish your soul. Reverend Alice Reed, right before the break, she was telling us about the foundation of religious science movement through the wise mind of Ernest Holmes. And he relied upon lots of the teachings by Ralph Waldo Emerson. And let us go by one of his quotes. Every revolution was thought first in one man's mind. It's really the power of the mind, isn't it, Alice? It's about the power of the mind. Is that what affirmative prayer is all about?
It is. It's a component of it, I would say. When I think about affirmative prayer, I think about a way for us to transcend the ordinary so that we can have a deeper experience of our oneness with Spirit. One of the things that we teach in the Science of Mind philosophy is that there's this creative process that is always happening as we are constantly in step with evolution. And so affirmative prayer gives us a way to actually step into and to activate the power of the creative process in our lives.
Go ahead, please.
So when we are actually stepping into this this acknowledgement of the creative life force, affirmative prayer allows us to align ourselves with it, to first recognize that there is a creative process that is forever creating out of itself, and then to align ourselves with it, and then just as the reading that you were reading at the beginning of the show, to make a statement of what it is we want to experience from that consciousness, that creative process that is always looking for a way to express itself. And so affirmative prayer is this opportunity that we have to align our consciousness, align our mind to the highest possible point in consciousness so that we can be hand in hand working with the creative process of the creative life force to experience life on this higher level.
So in this case, Alice, when we talk about affirmative prayer, we have received a question here by a listener who asked, what is the difference between affirmative prayer and like a regular prayer?
Certainly. I think affirmative prayer is more of an engaging process. Prayer, before I became acquainted with the Science of Mind philosophy, I think prayer was a communication that I would make with something that was separate from me or something that was outside of myself. Oftentimes it would be a pleading or a wishing or a hoping, but I wasn't as engaged with the process as I can be with affirmative prayer. With affirmative prayer, we can really step in and engage this process and know that we are working with this beautiful omnipresence of power that is always looking to have expression by means of us. And so it's a little bit different than, this type of prayer where I might be reaching out to something outside of myself, because what we know is that if God is everywhere, then we must also be expressions of God. And so as we step into this place of practicing affirmative prayer, we're actually reaching to that place within us that is made of God, that is made of Spirit, we are expressions of Spirit. And so with affirmative prayer, we find a greater integration with Spirit as opposed to, making a request outside ourselves. Is that making sense?
Yes, it's so interesting that, it makes me recall a teaching in Spiritism that says we are co-creators. So to me, it sounds that affirmative prayer is calling us to really do our part. Like, you co-create what you want in your mind, so then it's going to be, manifest. So,
Absolutely.
right? So it's not a passive. So it sounds to me that affirmative prayer is a very active way of communicating with God and engaging, as you say, versus just being passive and say, if you want to give me this, thank you. I'll be very grateful to you, as if we don't need to really co-create this in our minds.
Well, I think what we soon realize when we start to study the affirmative prayer and start to use that, we start to realize that there's always this creative process working in our lives, and so when we engage affirmative prayer, we're actually engaging consciousness in a very proactive way. And so what I mean by that is that and I'm going to refer to it this way, that there's this race consciousness. And what I mean by race consciousness is that every thought that we think goes into the embodiment of consciousness. And so if we're not awake and aware of what we're thinking and what we're receiving from the race consciousness, what ends up happening is that we have this default experience. The creative process is always working in our lives, and if we're not engaging it, it's going to continue to create in our lives, but maybe not the things we really want to experience. And a great example is the Great Depression. When we think about, at least in the U.S., when we think about the stock market, it's a very emotional mechanism, in that if people feel good about something, they invest their money, and if they don't feel good about things, they don't invest their money. And so we had this experience in the 20s where people, in the late 20s, where everybody got scared. And so we tapped into the race consciousness, and the majority of Americans had an impoverished experience. There were people who didn't have that impoverished experience, and those were the people who knew that they could, and whether they knew that they were doing this proactively or not, that they had a prosperity consciousness where they knew that the experience that they were seeing outside of themselves was not necessarily the experience that they had to have. And so to tie that back into affirmative prayer, when we recognize that we are co-creators with this creative process, we can then draw upon this consciousness, the ideas, the experiences, the feelings, whatever it is that we want to experience. We become more proactive with it. We decide what it is, the experience that we want to have. We begin to reject those experiences that we don't want to have. I can't tell you how many times I'll be in conversation with somebody and they'll start telling me how awful things are. It could be politics, it could be economics, it could be whatever in the community, and I will just say, well, that's not my experience.
But I have a question here from a listener. But Patricia from Connecticut, she's asking, what about how should people feel if they pray in the affirmative prayer mode and something doesn't happen? What does Ernest Holmes says about it?
That's a great question, because what will happen sometimes is that we will approach affirmative prayer thinking that there's something that we really want to experience, and then we'll do our work, we'll do our affirmative prayer, and for some reason that experience doesn't happen. What I can tell you from my own very intimate personal experience is that usually there's still something within me that is opposed to whatever it is I'm asking for. It could be some kind of thought form. It could be some kind of belief. Often there's, beliefs of not being enough, lack consciousness, that sort of thing. And so the reason we aren't all just, sitting in these amazing, getting everything we want just from one prayer is because the work is to continually clear our consciousness of beliefs that we have accepted, and to continue to look for those places within ourselves that have accepted, I'm just going to call them lies, that we're not made of God, and that that there isn't enough, and that we aren't enough. Well, all those human condition kinds of ideas that tend to lodge themselves in our consciousness are the very things that will stand in the way of us being able to have a positive experience with affirmative prayer.
So you would say that there is a need to know themselves, to know ourselves, to really make this affirmative prayer work.
I absolutely. Affirmative prayer does work, but sometimes the way it works is not the way we think it's going to work. I think you even said something as I was listening again to what you were reading, that there's always this intelligence that knows what's best.
Yes.
And so sometimes if there's something that we've decided we want, whether it be a relationship or the right livelihood, there's this divine intelligence that knows that there's something we need to get out of the way to really have the fullest experience. But that's not always the case. So, I've had many experiences where I will use affirmative prayer and I will have an immediate demonstration. But it just means that I was pretty clear in that area. So therefore I was able to align myself with Spirit and to just be able to speak the word and have the word demonstrated, pretty quickly.
So, Alice, is that true that the renowned Louise Hay actually got her whole foundational thinking from Ernest Holmes and the understanding of affirmative prayer?
I need you to repeat that question again. I'm sorry. Is it true?
I've heard that Louise Hay, Louise Hay, she's from the Hay House.
Oh, Louise Hay.
Yes, she.
Yes, she started out as a religious scientist. Yes.
Okay. So it is true.
She definitely started out as a religious scientist, and she grabbed hold of affirmations. And when you look at affirmative prayer, there are really 5 basic steps to the prayer, and I alluded to them already, but I'm going to tie that into Louise Hay.
Okay.
The 5 basic steps of affirmative prayer are recognition, where we recognize the greater whole, we recognize the divine intelligence. Unification, which is where we align ourselves to this greater whole. We recognize that we're one with it. And then realization is when we kind of stake our claim. And so that third step is really an affirmation step. And so if you are one who is using affirmations in your life, you're already using one of the steps of affirmative prayer. And Louise Hay found that if she just went to this very direct, make these affirmations, that people could find a way to transcend whatever condition or experience that they were having, and begin to experience whatever it is that they were affirming. And of course, we all know she had an amazing ministry in the AIDS community in the 80s, using affirmations and seeing a lot of demonstrations of healing in a community that was devastated with that disease.
Okay, we're going to give a short break, Alice, but when we come back, we want to recap some of these elements and understand a little bit more about the steps of affirmative prayer, okay?
Awesome. Thank you.
We will return to our program after these messages. Want to learn more about the ins and outs of mediumship? The book, In the Realms of Mediumship, by the spirit doctor Andre Louise, through the medium Chico Xavier, analyzes the various aspects of mediumistic communication and mediumship. He also praises the efforts of mediums who are faithful to the spiritual mandate they received before they reincarnated, warning them about the risks of badly practiced exchanges between the two worlds. Buy your copy today at www.ediceiofamerica.com.
The Spiritist Magazine is a trimestral, digital periodical that publishes the latest news on the Spiritist thought and the movement in the USA and worldwide. at www.spiritistmagazine.com.
Spread the word. Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
Study Spiritism online at eSpiritism. eSpiritism is an online tool to promote the study and practice of Spiritism while contributing to the preparation of Spiritist practitioners. For full access to courses, go to www.e-spiritism.org.
If you missed out on any previous shows, no worries. We have an on-demand section of all previous shows and interviews. Go to our website at www.kardecradio.com.
Emmanuel's Novels. The reputable mentor, Emmanuel, wrote a 5-book series of Spiritist novels that can truly transform your life. Starting with 2,000 years ago, Emmanuel delights our minds with the true account of characters that are so similar to each of us. Discover yourself in Emmanuel's novels and live better. Buy your copy today at www.ediceiofamerica.com. And now we return to our program.
We are talking about affirmative prayer and the various steps, and Reverend Alice Reed is here to help us understand. As she mentioned before, it's very important to know that self-knowledge is also a step into engaging in affirmative prayer. Because sometimes we create that statement in our minds, that affirmation, but there are roadblocks in our inner selves. Maybe conflict we're not aware of or something. So even in Spiritism, in the Spirit's book by Allan Kardec, Question and Answer 919, it talks a beautiful knowledge about the importance of self-knowledge. When Kardec asked the illuminated mind, what is the most effective means of improving ourselves in this life and resisting the draw of doing bad things? And the answer was, a sage of antiquity has told you, know thyself. And later on, there is a great explanation about self-knowledge, talking about self-knowledge as the key to individual improvement. So we're talking about affirmative prayer as something that can help us boost our lives and really engage into positive mindset and the power of our own minds. So, Alice, when you were telling us about the 5 steps, I guess that the 5 steps are more a didactic way of understanding what it is than really like something that people should be worried about. Or how should people practically engage into affirmative prayer?
How should people practically engage in affirmative prayer? Was that the question?
Yes.
Well, I think these 5 steps act like, for at least they have for me. They create this framework for me to plug into that is almost practical. Before coming across this particular teaching, what I found was that I was drawn towards spirituality as a whole, and I found myself looking at different philosophies, but I had trouble really integrating it into my life. And so when I started to learn about these affirmative prayer and the 5 steps that are taught in our particular teaching, what I found is that it was a great framework for me to plug into. And then once I really became comfortable with it, it was kind of like training wheels. I didn't necessarily have to think about it so much in the 5 steps, because it was an understanding for me that I was simply recognizing and remembering the greater whole in the divine intelligence, and I was remembering that I was one with that, and then I would stake my claim or my affirmation. The 4th and 5th steps that I hadn't gotten to were the step of release, where we simply release this, our word, release our affirmation, release our realization out into the higher mind, back into the arms of God, if you will, and then knowing that it's going to be done, because we know that everything in life happens through this creative process. And so once we recognize that there's a creative process happening all the time, we simply release it into the creative process. And then the fifth step is Thanksgiving, where we state our gratitude and really enter into the consciousness of receivership. And so while those steps may seem a little foreign at first, what you find is, like with anything else, as you begin to use them as really just remembrances about how spirit descends, into our everyday lives, as it needs some kind of mechanism, and this is one way where we can really allow ourselves to be engaged with spirit and to communicate with spirit in a prayer process that allows us to really to tap into what it is at our heart's desire, and then to let God, as you said in the beginning of the program, and really just tell God what it is we want and stake our claim in it.
Mm-hmm. So it's really the power of affirming. I was reading some websites about it. Would you give us an example about how people should frame? I'm not saying there is a template, but if you could give us an example of what an affirmative prayer is.
Absolutely. And I'm going to use, because I also, very involved in the financial field, let's talk about money, because that's a place that I don't care who you are, what station in life you're at, what country you live in. We are all affected by this thing called money, and everybody, it is that medium that we use in our world. So let's talk about that place we get to sometimes where we want to have a greater experience of prosperity. And so I would engage, if I found myself in a place, which I sometimes do, where I'm feeling like there's not enough, where I'm knowing that somehow I've accepted the lie of the world that there's not enough and there's competition, and I have to fight for everything that I get. When I get into that mindset, I would engage the affirmative prayer by simply remembering that God is, Spirit is, there's a divine intelligence that is ever abundant. Now, it's pretty automatic for me after a number of years of study that when I think of spirit, when I think of the divine intelligence, I automatically equate that with the forever examples that I have of this abundance. I look at for me, I always look at nature, and nature is forever abundant. Even in the sacred scriptures throughout the world, they talk about the fact that the nature is always taking care of itself, and that there's abundance of life, and we can see it all around us. And so I tap into that highest idea of abundance, and that's the first step. The second step is to remember that I'm one with that abundance, that my very physical form. I think about the millions of cells in my lifetime that are recreating themselves without any effort from me. So I tap into the highest idea of life and abundance. I see how that happens in my own life, and then I stake my claim that I know that I am going to have whatever it is that I'm looking for. And so if what I was looking for was an increase in my income, I would just follow those steps. And then I would give thanksgiving and release and thanksgiving. And so I'm going to go ahead and do a prayer, if that's okay with you. And I'm going to do that prayer right now so people can hear how it would sound like. And the more practice you get with this process, it becomes very easy. But it's a little, sometimes it can be a little bit of, you have to think it through as you start to engage this. So here we go.
Okay.
There is one life. That life is forever creating. It is forever creating out of itself. I know that I see this beautiful, immutable power in nature and everywhere around me, that there's no lack in the world around me. And so I recognize this beautiful divine intelligence in the life around me, and I recognize it within myself. I know that I am one with the power and the presence of Spirit as it is forever creating out of itself, that there's no separation between me and the life that I see around me. I accept this truth about myself, and I claim now that my income is increased, that just like the cells of my body are forever regenerating in themselves, my income continues to regenerate itself, and I continue to stay in this flow of power and potency and increase. I know that this is the truth of the life that I live, and I allow myself to live it fully and completely. I embrace this divine intelligence as it moves through my life. I know that as I speak these words into the law of abundance, the law of increase, the law of circulation, and I know it is the law that makes them so in my life right now. I am so grateful for this highest and complete truth about who I am and how I live. I express these words with gratitude. I release them with a surrendered heart, and I allow Spirit to do what Spirit does so well, getting out of the way and making room for the demonstration. I thank God for this treatment, for this prayer, for this affirmative prayer that I've spoken into the law. I release it completely. I let it go. And I say thank you. And so it is. Amen.
It feels good. I can tell you that. It feels good, Alice. It feels good, and it more than anything else, it makes us feel connected to God. So it's very practical, you would say, and people, I got to know that people have no difficulty whatsoever in engaging affirmative prayer. Would you recommend any literature for people who want to know more about this?
Well, there's a number of really great books. The listener in Connecticut who was talking about looking for, having blocks and what do you do when prayers don't work. There's one book that is a very simple book you can get on Amazon. It's called The Ideal Made Real, and it's by Christian Larson.
Okay.
And he does talk about metaphysics, and he talks about the idea of how we can engage metaphysics and how we can engage scientific prayer. Affirmative prayer, another word for that. You Can Change Your Life by Ernest Holmes is a great book on how to engage affirmative prayer. And I'm thinking that there's How to Use the Science of Mind, another really great book by Ernest Holmes. The Art of Life by Ernest Holmes are also really great books. There's some more complex books that I could recommend, and I wish I had a website for you for the recommended readings. Had I thought about that, maybe I can send that to you at a later date, and you could post it on your website for people who are more interested. But there's a ton of literature out there. I mean, even the common gurus of our day, like Deepak Chopra and Wayne Dwyer, talk about these principles in their own way. So I think it's pretty prevalent, in our world these days, as more and more of us are awakening to this higher truth of our connectedness with life.
Yes, you are so right, Alice. And there's so much joy when we talk about affirmative prayer because it brings the positive side of life. So what would you like to share as your final comments with the listener today?
That prayer is not some passive pleading, maybe it'll work kind of practice, but it is a practice that always works. That even when sometimes we find ourselves stepping into this process of affirmative prayer and really engaging it as a regular practice, sometimes we'll find that everything unlike what it is we're trying to affirm will come up. I refer to this as chemicalization. And so this is really an opportunity for us to really be clear on what it is we want to create and what it is we want to realize in our lives. And so when the things that are unlike it come forward, that is the time for us to really stand strong in what it is we want to create and to continue to affirm and be positive and to see the highest for ourselves. That those little setbacks are not the truth of who we are. They are simply coming up to be cleared, just like when you introduce light into a dark room, the dark has to flee. So I would want to share that because that is often the experience of people who really decide to engage this technology.
That's beautiful. Alice, we cannot thank you enough for coming to us today and spending your time with us teaching about the affirmative prayer. Certainly, we and all the listeners will be more empowered about how we can engage with God into creating the life that we are dreaming about day in, day out. So thank you very, very much, and we hope to have you back soon in the near future.
I love that, Vanessa. This has been a real treat. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. And it's just a few days after Thanksgiving, but we want to thank you so much for everything you have been doing to the community and to us now at Kardec Radio. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So, dear listener, we hope you have enjoyed. Right now you have a new tool in your hands, the knowledge of the power of affirmative prayer. Go there, the book, Ideal Made Real, or You Can Change Your Life, and many others. Of course, you can always Google to know more about this, but go to the root. Ernest Holmes' books are certainly the best way to go with. Reverend Alice Reed just taught us, and, let us be very engaged into what we want to create for our lives, because God is a creator, but we are the co-creators, and we need to be active to reach what we need. As Jesus said, and we can quote, of course, all the time, we can quote from Mark 11:24. Whatever you may ask for in a prayer, believe you will receive it, and it will be granted to you. So, get to know more about this. Read also the chapter 27 of the Gospel According to Spiritism to know more about how you ask and you shall receive. Right now, we would like to give a last break. And when we come back, we'll do what we do every Saturday at the end of the program. We're going to pray together, okay? Right after the break.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Books of Andre Luis. Through the hands of the most prolific medium of all times, Chico Javier, the spirit doctor Andre Luis wrote a series of books that unveil the mechanisms of life and life after life. From the best-selling novel No Solar, Our Home, to And Life Goes On, the reader will find illumination for a fulfilled life on Earth as well as immortal happiness. Check the many titles available at the international distributor, EDI CEI of America. Their website is www.ediceiofamerica.com.
Spread the word. Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
Spiritist Network, your gateway to on-demand Spiritist videos. www.spiritistnetwork.com.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio. Traveling to another country? Immigrating elsewhere? Prepare yourself by reading the book Among Brothers of Other Lands, in which several loving and wise spirits wrote through the hands of Chico Xavier and Waldo Vieira, telling all of us the tips and hints of a successful transition to a new land. Buy your copy today at www.ediceiofamerica.com.
Do you want Spiritist books for your children? At Odyssey of America, you'll find a collection of them, from the best-selling book Our Father, in which the Spirit May May, through Chico Xavier, brought countless poems, stories, and folk tales based on the Lord's Prayer, to the beautiful and educational collection by the author Adailson Salles on Back to School and many others. Buy your copy today at www.odysseyofamerica.com.
And now we return to our program.
Dear listener, in a week from today, we're going to have a special program with Alan Lux, author of The Healing Power of Doing Good. He's going to be here telling us the very healing power of doing good. There is a research that talks about unprecedented facts, including the helper's high. It's so important this very time of the year people become more compassionate, somewhat because of the holiday season. We just so hope. But that's the feeling. And we want to know, what's the power of doing good? It's actually very healing. So be here with us. He's going to be here live, Alan Lux, talking about his book, The Healing Power of Doing Good. In the meantime, between now and then, we have programs, God at Home on Wednesdays, and then on Thursdays, Spiritist Talks, and then on Sundays, Spiritist Awareness. Now we would like to invite you to join us in a special prayer. As we talked much about prayer and affirmative prayer, let us pray. Let us pray together, raising our thoughts to the most high, feeling our connection with the one and only that created us and sustains our lives. Dear loving Father, Mother God, thank you for bringing Reverend Ellis Reed today at Kardec Radio, teaching us about how to communicate better with you, how to know more about ourselves, and how to transform our lives to the positive always. May everyone who at this very moment is feeling sad, lonely, abandoned or abused, receive a shower of healing blessings, consoling their minds, encouraging themselves to keep on walking in spite of the difficulties, knowing that everything passes in life and that our lives are immortal, that life goes on and there is much to work upon, to grow, to progress, without any limitations. May our guardian angels, who are messengers sent by you in our lives, find our open hearts so they can pour onto us the instructions that we need to co-create with you in love and light. And so be it. Dear listener, we hope you are more nourished than when you started listening to this program. And we wish you lots of blessings. wherever you are in this world. And if you have a question or a comment or a suggestion, remember, go to cardiacradio.com. We have a contact form that goes straight to our email, cardiacradio@gmail.com, and we'll be happy to assist you in your question or to listen to your comment and suggestion. We are here to really nourish your soul. We wish you lots of blessings, and let us begin a new month with a good attitude of giving and doing good. By the way, we're talking about the healing power doing good in a week. Many blessings to you, and talk to you in a week.